Hey, it's Brain Muffin back with another look at stuff going on in pop culture and the movies. And here we have from Forbes magazine, our good friend Scott Mendelson is back. And it looks like we have pre-qualifying for Captain Marvel already in place. So, because, the trailer was released and a lot of people were meh about it. Brie Larson looks like she's bored out of her mind. I really don't know how the smile meme got started. It really was just emote anything and a couple times smile. I think she has a smirk somewhere in there. And then people have noticed that she has that same expression on everything. So it's not just here. So let's see what Scott Mendelson has to say. The news broke yesterday. I was catching up with Dan Fogelman at Life Itself, the first half hour. I don't care. Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers, Time Warner, just dated their Untitled Birds of Prey movie for February 7th, 2020. This puts it against Peter. Really? They made a second Peter Rabbit? And one James Bond 25. Amusingly enough, James Bond 25 was initially slotted to open 1 week after Wonder Woman 1984, which I don't think it's going to do nearly as well as the first one, but we'll see. I mean, Gal is quite beautiful, but she is not Wonder Woman. I'm sorry. We have no idea what Kathy Yon's Girly Gang superhero flick is going to be like, or not. Talking our rating is buff, but with Captain Marvel, Wonder Woman, Birds of Prey, and long desired Black Widow movie coming down the pike. There's a Black Widow movie, really long desired by whom? The future of the comic book hero movie may be, as I say, female, not exclusively, mind you. Okay, doesn't have to top 1 billion to be a hit. Yeah, well, Captain Marvel, adjusted for inflation, has the lowest budget. It has the same budget. I think it's actually slightly less than the first Iron Man movie. So that ought to tell you something. Ran a post yesterday. CBC ran a post calling it Marvel played by Brie Larson, next billion-dollar star. Nope. Allow me to nip this in the bud right now. Could be another. No. However, it's not remotely a guarantee. No, it's not. And I don't think the next trailer has to really wow people. I mean, it has to really wow people. The negative response that you saw to what looks like Brie's indifference to the whole character, that's going to play forward. And also, she's already started crapping on the fans, and even before the trailer came out. So, one more bit from rare reviews and a narrative saving the DCEU critically slammed. Yeah, see, that's part of it. Is Wonder Woman was a mediocre movie set by around horrible movies. So, I mean, my wife and I went and saw Wonder Woman, and she was mad about it. She was a huge Wonder Woman fan back in the day. It offers solo female director Patty Jenkins. Yeah, from a story. Incidentally enough, that was a what's his name? Zack Snyder film. It was actually his script. So, don't give them too much credit, but it was an okay flick. But had the other movies been better and Wonder Woman been what it was, it would not have done nearly as much business. If Batman vs Superman, Suicide Squad had been really good, and Wonder Woman was the mediocrity that it was, it would have done probably a third less, maybe more. It had a future. Marvel will be contending with potentially heavy competition, so I don't think the Lego Movie 2 or X-Men Dark Phoenix. I think Dark Phoenix is not going to see the light of day. It won't pull Black Panther. Brie Larson does not have you don't have the narrative anymore. We've already had the female-led action movie, superhero movie, so you can't have a first there. Maybe first in the Marvel if you want to put air quotes around that. Black Panther had somewhat of that Black Power narrative, but nothing close to what the media made out of it. That was more of a media thing than reality. So another key thing to remember, Wonder Woman didn't succeed on the scale that it did specifically because audience raced out to support. It's succeeded because we really wanted to see Wonder Woman movie. If audience was supported female, Tomb Raider. And again, Tomb Raider was a miscast. You got to look at that character. She's not a skinny, flat-chested bimbo. I mean, that's what they did with Wonder Woman, but, this is... and didn't manage to turn John Boyega's Pacific Rim Uprising. Wrinkle in Time. Again, when you crap on your audience and you crap on the source material and you make it about a political narrative, it's amazing. I mean, Wonder Woman had hints of that men are stupid, men are bad stuff, but it wasn't the overwhelming theme. And some of that was because of the fish out of water nature of Wonder Woman, which they cannot do the second time because it's going to be placed, so it's in the 80s, so it's almost 70 years, so 65 years after the first one. So maybe the first MCU where, unless the fact that it's a female superhero matters. Here's the thing about Ant-Man. Ant-Man movies did not do well. They did okay, but they didn't hit their 2.5 times budget especially when you add in marketing. They don't play well overseas, and the second Ant-Man movie did even more poorly than the first. But they didn't lose money, and they didn't make, they're not the huge blockbusters, but they also don't cost nearly as much. So, those big movies with a huge ensemble cast that bring in $1.5 billion, they cost like $250 million to make. So maybe as a percentage, they're probably all about the same. Extent that general audiences aren't inherently familiar with the Captain Marvel character. Again, you could have started something and started her as Miss Marvel, and we could have done something like we did with Thor, where these things kind of happen in parallel, and we get a backstory, and then it kind of look at Ant-Man. We've had 2 movies with Ant-Man, and he's not part of the ensemble cast. Now he's probably going to be in Infinity War Part 2, whatever they end up calling it. Guardians of the Galaxy didn't really come into that foray till they had 2 movies that were a little bit separate. But they started to bring them all together. We could have done this with Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel was never part of this. This is a shoehorn being shoehorned in. It's going to feel that way. African Nation, the movie from the director of. So none of this means Captain Marvel is doomed. So we finally get to there's all this backstory gibberish filler really. I think it is doomed, but not fully. If the movie does not do well, we're going to get called sexist pigs, and we're a bunch of unwashed masses. They got to tell a good story. If they tell a good story, even without Brie Larson, if she looks bored through the whole thing, it'll do okay. If she looks bored and it's a horrible story and it's a bunch of man-hating, it'll go down and we'll get blamed. So I don't know about doomed, but it is the first real, it's like Marvel's finally turning the heat up on this SJW nonsense. But again, I think it's being forced on Feige and was never part of the plan. Because if it was, then we would have had a movie several years ago that would kind of parallel some stuff, made some backstory, some other things go on, similar to Ant-Man, similar to Guardians of the Galaxy. We don't need a Black Widow movie either. The future of the comic book may be female, but why do they keep saying this? It's not female. The future is not female. The future should be about good movies and good stories, whether they're man, woman, black, green, purple, or otherwise. Tell good stories first, and we don't care what the heroes are. Next stage of the super. No, this is not evolution. Evolution is random change. This is directed. This is revolution, really. This is directed change. Evolution is random change. Film noir, pulp, modern heroes, and there is a film noir cut of Logan, so this is also not new. And connected mythologies, a superhero story. I don't know what he's doing with that about movie and minorities, but that's something I like to dive into later when I have Wonder Woman was a massive hit because it was well reviewed and well received. Wonder Woman that tapped into the cultural zeitgeist because it was well written. Especially compared to the rest of the DCEU. Okay. Did a Black Panther. Again, there was a political agenda driving the marketing of that. A lot of it outside of the studio. A lot of that was not the studio's fault. It's probably going to be it's not going to be a huge hit. I think it's going to do less than It might do. Well, it all depends. If these SJWs want these women-led movies actually go to theaters, because quite often they complain, but they don't support stuff they get. If it's a good movie, it'll do as well. It's a good story. It'll do as well as the Ant-Man movies. If it is not, it'll have it'll be number one the opening weekend, and then it'll fall rapidly. And of course, we'll have, and actually, I want the chaos because I'm just kind of sick of all this political nonsense. I don't think Wonder Woman 1984 will do well. I don't think Birds of Prey will do well, and I don't think Black Widow will do well. Can be a winner without breaking records. And similar to what they did with Wonder Woman, where it was breaking records. Those are records in air quotes, and so it was, they were really, really, really fine lining that. It was an all first movie with an all female cast or an all female crew or a mostly female crew, and because we've had women directed movies, long before. Big was directed by a woman years ago. It was pun intended, was a big hit. We've had other movies directed by women, written by women, starring women that have done very well. So this is this whole political narrative, and none of this has ever happened before, which is bullcrap. It has all happened before. Blade was a black-led superhero movie. Was a franchise. It was very successful. There's also been horrible white-led superhero movies. I mean, we've had Blank Man and not Handyman. What was the other one? There's been several black-led superhero movies that haven't done well, but there's also been white male-led ones that also did poorly, and a lot of it's because the writing was horrible. Their acting, the special effects can come into and kind of hinder something. But if you start with a very good story, and if the special effects aren't too bad, they won't bring the movie down much. But if you have a horrible story and horrible special effects and horrible acting, and it all kind of combines, and I think this is what we're getting with, we'll see. We'll get another trailer and see if Brie emotes anything. But apparently she's, my big thing, she's already started crapping on the audience. So a lot of if it fails, it's because they've already started the political narrative. And, I don't need another. I mean, I'm over this whole superhero genre. I'm ready for the whole MCU to end, take a break, and then maybe reboot, maybe just do some kind of like what you used to do. A couple movies that are, 2 or 3 movies, maybe 4, like the Batmans or the Spider-Mans that are they're somewhat related because the story continues. But I'd really like to see something more along the lines of James Bond, where when the actors or whomever's involved, they want to move on, they just get recast. You don't have to reboot the whole thing. You don't have to start with another origin story. Just recast, similar to what we did with Batman. It just continues. Now Robin stayed the same and Alfred stayed the same, but Batman changed several times, and you don't have to just go with it. James Bond's been doing this for 50 years or something. We're coming up on the 25th. And I know they rebooted it recently, and that's kind of worn some fans off. And it was unnecessary, except to make a political statement about the Cold War. You are a relic, James Bond. You are a relic of the Cold War. But why do we have to destroy everything? Why can't we just continue to build on what came before and just make bigger, better stories and different stories and explore different aspects of the universe, and we don't have to destroy everything? So we'll see. The setup for failure. What's interesting is Mendelson's take on this. It seems to be around of what's coming out around the movie, as opposed to the story and the actress. That's interesting. We'll have to see, because I think Shazam will do fairly well. Zach is not a huge. I mean, he did very well as Chuck, and he plays that nerdy part well, but he doesn't really have the size. But again, if Shazam is being played as a non-serious movie, and it's not as campy as the Batman of the 60s, but it doesn't take itself too seriously, I think it'll work. And it'll be a bit of a comic relief in the DCEU, because it's just been brooding and foreboding for so long. And that's part of why Wonder Woman was also another thing why it did well, is it was nice and bright. You had the contrast of Themyscira was this very bright and colorful and beautiful place, and then they get into the man's world, but it's London, and it's an industry, and so some of that is that it's not necessarily male female, but it's a nature which you could say is male or female, Mother Nature and all that. But it's a similar dichotomy we see in the Lord of the Rings with Tolkien, where the nature, the hobbits and the elves are all very nature, and then the mankind, but it's the destruction and industry that burns down the forests and destroys the world. So it's more of a environmentalist, take care of your pollution and stuff movement. So we'll see. I think it's interesting that we're already getting the apologists out saying, hey, it's already set up for failure. So when it fails, they can say, see, these other movies are more successful, or they're going to blame, cisgendered white males yet again. And as opposed to telling a good story, just give us a good story and give us some good action. And that's all we really need. These are popcorn flicks. They're not supposed to be political statements. All right. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for clicking like. What do you think about this? Do you think that Captain Marvel is being set up for failure, or do you think this is just the excuse train is starting early? All right. Bye.